Hello, everyone. This is Jerome Green, and welcome to Near Death to Life Experience Podcast. And this whole podcast was generated from my own experience back in June of 2024, the day after Father's Day. I went in for what I thought was going to be a routine MRI, which turned out to be a near-death experience. I went into anaplectic shock. I died for 10 to 12 minutes. And during that period of time, I don't even know where I was. I've been told different things. I worked with a friend of mine who's a shaman in Australia who kind of gave me some insights on just exactly where I was. But it motivated me to really look at death and life, and therefore the title, Near Death to Life. And what this podcast is going to be about is simply about finding guests along with myself that have had transformative moments. They've had things that have changed in their life. They've had people in their lives that maybe have experienced the same things that I have. But the main thing is the resiliency and getting back to life. And that's what has happened to me, is made me look at life in a different way. And on a humorous note, the one thing that did occur for me on a positive note from my near-death experience was that my golf game got better. My swing got better. I hit the ball in the middle of the fairway, and I golf. And the reason for that is tied into determining what really matters. So when I go on the golf course now, I'm not even really worried about the results. I'm not even thinking about the outcome or the money I'm betting. I just go play golf. And by doing that, I've actually become a better golfer. So I want to welcome you today to the first podcast of hopefully many. And I want to introduce you to Garrett Lazaro, who I've known since he was 8 years old, and who's had a very fascinating life and has amazing stories to tell us. And I'll let him introduce himself and kind of give us a little insight onto who he is and what he's about and the changes that have happened in his life. So Garrett.
Thank you. I appreciate it. My name is Garrett Lazaro. I am originally from Missoula, Montana. I made the transformation to move down here to Salt Lake City, Utah, where I spent a good majority of my youth and teenage years. I overcame a lot of things moving here, like any kid goes through when they first move to a new town, making new friends, finding out your people, what school you're going to go to, who you fit in with, and survived that. I'm sure every teenager goes through that and thinking it's the end of the world, but made it through that. And come to find out, mental illness was a very struggling topic for the kids in my grade, and it is now being talked about a lot more. And I think that there is a mental health illness kind of pandemic going on right now, and I am a firsthand experience in that, and went through some troubles with that we'll get into later, and decided that I didn't want to keep playing hockey. I played hockey for almost 20 years and played semi-pro hockey as well, and had an injury that shot me down from that, and thought I need to choose a new life. I need to find a new perspective on things, and I decided that I was going to be a horse trainer. And so I packed up my life, took the last $600 in my bank account and drove back east and went to Wisconsin for a year, and then transitioned my way down to Texas for the last 3 years, and that's where I've been holding up and building a name for myself as a horse trainer.
Well, Garrett, there's so much to unpack. Let's start with your why. Like, why did you transition from hockey to, besides the injury, what led you to being a horse trainer? I've known you for one time. And when I saw your story on Facebook, I was like, is that Garrett on a horse? And like, what is he? Wow. I was really immediately like, wow, I've never envisioned this. So what happened that you decided you navigated, or you sort of was led to horse training?
Yeah, so when I was younger, I grew up around horses. My biological father was a bull rider. My
Mm-hmm.
mom showed and trained horses herself in the NRHA, the reining horse community. And not only that, my grandmother and my grandfather was a cowboy out here in Montana, and my grandma bred horses and raised horses
Mm-hmm.
for my mom in that instance. So I've kind of always had a connection and a draw to the horse world. I just moving to Utah kind of gave me that emphasis to pursue hockey and, quote unquote, be a city boy.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of had a realization after one of my very close friends committed suicide in the middle of one of my hockey seasons that I need to make a change. I need to find something that makes me feel whole again because I found myself going down those same thought processes
Mhm.
and feeling like I was going to be going down the same rabbit hole to some extent.
Mhm.
And so what I found was after my injury, I decided to start going to the barn more with my mom. And she had a jumping horse out there in West Valley. And she had me come over and she told me, "Hey, do you want to ride today?" And I
Mhm.
obviously said yes. And I decided to go on a little trailer ride with her just to the sports complex around the corner. And I remember discussing with my mom. I was like, "Mom, I don't know what I'm going to do. My hockey career's over. I
Mhm.
can't play semi-pro anymore, and I feel just lost, and I'm a little confused." And I told her, the one thing I still have no question about is my love for horses, and I do really like them. And my mom told me that, whatever you decide, I'll support you. Well, a year went past, and I remember I was sitting at a job site. I was working construction with one of my buddies, and I was sitting at a job site, and I told him, this sucks. I don't want to be, and no offense to any construction workers out there. I said, I don't want to be the run of the mill suburbs living construction worker. I don't want to live the rest of my life in Riverton, Draper, Corner Canyon, Eagle Mountain, and be a suburbs guy. I
Mhm.
never saw myself doing that. I always saw myself living somewhere, out in the middle of nowhere. And that's how I grew up, and that's how I decided I wanted to end it out. And he told me, the only way you can do that is if, you pursue horses like you've always told me you wanted to. And I told him,
Mhm.
it's not a bad idea. And I told my mom, hey, I think I want to go train horses. And I got no backlash from my mom. She told me that's a great idea. So I made the transition, took the last $600 in my bank account. I got in my truck. I drove all the way to Wisconsin with one of my rope horses that I was owning at the time and roping on. And I made a couple friends out there, and I started working for a cow horse trainer up in Rice Lake, Wisconsin, named Lance Scheffel. And he was what you would imagine a cowboy from Wisconsin to be, pretty hard headed, stubborn, but all in all, a great guy, a good horse trainer, and a good
Mhm.
mentor. And he kind of rekindled my deep affection with horses and really showed me, hey, like you may still be new to this to some extent, even though you have prior knowledge. But what I would like to teach you is how to really fall back in love with it and really figure it out. And I spent almost a year with him and I told him, hey, like I can't do the cold anymore. I mean, I couldn't do the negative 40s and the wind chill and the snow, and it was becoming too much for me. So I decided that, I think I'm going to move down to Texas. And thankfully, my mom knows a couple horse trainers from Texas. And one of them gave me a call back and said, I would love to have you come down here. How soon can you be here? And I said, I could be there by the end of this month. And he said, I give you 2 weeks and then I need you up here. So I packed up everything once again and I left Rice
Mhm.
Lake, Wisconsin, drove 14 hours south to Texas, and really, really started diving into my horse training career and have had a successful last 3 years down there in Texas with Jarvis Anderson. He's a phenomenal mentor, coach, trainer, boss, friend, and he's helped me out with a lot of the suicides that I've gone through in the past 4 years. Since I've worked with him, I've gone through several. And he has been very, very good about teaching me, you can only do so much in life, and especially
Mhm.
with horses. You can only do so much before you complicate things.
Yeah.
And I think that
Mhm.
that thought process taught me that, keep it simple. But the
Mhm.
simpler you can keep it, the easier it is for everybody. And
Yeah.
what I noticed was is that, the simpler I was on a horse, the better I
Mhm.
did. The
Mhm.
more I thought, the more I overthink, and the more I did, it became more drawn out, sketchy, exasperated, and not as pretty. And
Yeah.
so it was a great thing for me to do, and I think leaving my home state a couple times was
Mhm.
probably one of the best things I did for myself and for my character.
Yeah. So it's interesting. There's several themes going here. So there's the mental health theme that I really want to discuss with you because I know your experience with that since I've known you has been pretty
Yep.
dramatic. And
Yep.
but I want to also address what you just said about simplicity because that's exactly what happened to me as a result of my situation with my near-death experience, I came out of that with wanting to simplify my life. And it showed, I noticed it most in my golf game, which then carries over to other aspects of my life. But let's get into the mental health piece. You've had, we were offline and you were talking about you're down in Utah now for a
Yep.
friend's funeral who committed suicide. And you said that you've had 8 friends that have committed suicide over your lifespan. And you're very young. How old are you?
I'm
25?
I'm 23.
23. So 23, you've had 8 friends, associates that have committed suicide. So talk to me a little bit about that and how has it affected you? What have you had? What have you done to have this own transformation in your life?
Yeah, so it started out, the first one was my father. My
Mm-hmm.
biological father committed suicide before I could honestly remember. And
Mm-hmm.
whether that was because of the trauma blockage as a kid, you kind of just forget things
Mm-hmm.
or whatever it was. But yeah, my dad committed suicide at a very young age. And I didn't really make the connection until I was about 9 or 10 years old. When my mom told me, I remember asking her, I was sitting on the couch and I said, "Hey, where's my dad?" And I remember that's when she told me, "Hey, like your dad passed away."
Mm-hmm.
And that led me down not necessarily a dark path, but a curious one at that. Um, Trying to find answers, asking questions, obviously being shut down by my own family about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then some time went on. I moved to Utah. I was a little bit of an angry kid. I had a little bit of anger issues, and I understood that. And hockey was a good outlet for me in that aspect. It kept me very grounded, but still at the same time, I mean, teenager going through hormones, already a little off kilter with being upset quite often. Um, and it wasn't until my sophomore year of high school, when I remember this one the most. My buddy Ian, who I went through 8th grade all the way to our sophomore year with, we used to hang out all the time. He would come over and we'd go skateboarding, we'd go snowboarding, we'd go do whatever. I remember he told me one day that he didn't want to be around anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I still didn't quite comprehend it. I knew my dad had passed away from suicide, but I still couldn't fathom what that was yet. I hadn't dealt with it at full extent yet. And it wasn't more than 3 days later that I got a call from his older sister telling me that he had passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the first one that kind of stuck with me. And we moved on from that and we remembered him. And we had a big old service at the skate park. And we kept going down that path. And it wasn't until my junior year of high school that another one of my buddies took his life as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that one was tough. And it stung and it was great. I had all my friends around. And I just remember feeling to myself like, there's no way anything more like this can happen. Like,
Mm-hmm.
life isn't going to do me 4 times in a row. This is it. Like, it's sad to think about, but it might be over now. And that's when life really hit me. I went through my senior year of high school, graduated high school, went to play hockey back east, came back home, and I was 19 years old at the time. And I was playing hockey down in Provo for the Provo Preds, which is a USPHL hockey team.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a phone call on the morning of January 19th, and it was a phone call from my best friend Logan's mom. And she was calling to tell me that Logan took his life that night. And that one broke me down all the way. And I was in my truck driving to practice, and I just stopped on the side of the freeway, got out of my truck, no tears, no words. And I stood next to my truck for probably 20 minutes, just unable to move. And
Mm-hmm.
to me, I was just in complete and utter shock. And I didn't want to do anything. I didn't know what to do. I was completely lost. And some time went by. We went to the funeral. We moved on. And I still was a heaping mess, suffering with ideation, suicidal thoughts, just bad mojo going on in my life. And I'm not going to say my friends were bad influences, but we were young, dumb, and we would find excuses to do stuff that we probably shouldn't have been doing at that age, like going to parties, being stupid, getting in trouble. And I was already very, very angry from my friend passing away. I'm still angry at him. I hadn't grieved all the way yet. And I ended up getting myself into a little trouble, not with the law or anything, just with family. And I remember I told my mom I got in a massive fight with her, and I love her to this day, and she's my rock and has helped me out in everything in life. But I remember I got into a gnarly fight with her, and I said, maybe if I took Logan's place, everything would be okay. And
Mm,
that right there, I knew how much that stung to my mom. And it wasn't until that night that it hit me like I had a not necessarily a come to Jesus moment, but just an awakening of like, that's stupid. Like, why would you ever say that? What is the purpose of that? Why would you ever do that?
mm,
And then I remember, Logan used to tell me all the time, Garrett, you're too occupied. You do too much stuff. You're always running. You're always running around town. You're always doing something. You're never just relaxed. And then I was always had to go do something, always busy minded. And that night I just sat and was sitting out on a lookout bench in Utah. And I just remember breaking down into all tears, dropping to my knees, giving myself and like looking up to the sky, asking for answers,
mm,
knowing I was never going to get them. And I asked myself day in, day out, why? And then, as the viewers don't, I started doing mental health advocacy.
mm,
I started doing a t-shirt support program where I was selling t-shirts and clothing items and donating it all to mental health awareness in Utah. And I did that for a summer. And then I had to go back to hockey. Well, I decided that that year in hockey, I was going to represent my best friend the best way I knew how, who was a hockey player. I
mm,
decided to wear his number all season. So I wore his number all season. And halfway through the season, me and my best friend Jesse were at a movie theater and we got another phone call. And it was from our buddy telling us that he can't do it anymore. He's struggling. He hates his life. He hates his dad, so on and so forth. And I remember Jesse told him, like, don't worry about it, don't worry about it. We're on our way. I got out of the car, we run up to the house, and all we see is cop cars. And I have a buddy who was a cop. He come out and he said, I need you guys to sit down for me. And he told me that our buddy had taken his own life and his father has taken his life at the same time.
wow.
And that one stung because, as you know, we had our issues at a young age. We were still very close friends. And that one just, I just broke down and cried in front of my buddies. And I couldn't even ask why anymore. I didn't know why. And so I thought, I can't live here anymore. This is number 5 already. I need to leave. Or number 6 already. I need to leave. I can't do
Mm,
it. And I began to develop this idea that Utah was a bubble state and that everything that happened in Utah bounced off the bubble and came back.
mm,
Everybody knew everybody. Everybody's secrets were out on the table. No matter what you did, what you were, how much you changed, everybody remembered you for who you were.
mm,
And I just kept thinking to myself, is this how everybody's going to remember my friends? My friends Diesel, Logan, Mike, Jackson, Ian. Are they going to remember them as the guys who committed suicide? Or are they going to remember them as the fun-loving people they were? Are they going to remember them as the party animal? Are they going to remember them as the adventurer, the guy who showed up to the rink an hour early and got ready for practice with you? And I couldn't help it. I couldn't help myself in that instance. And I remember calling my mom and breaking down and telling her, like, I'm going to finish out this hockey season and then I'm going somewhere else. I'm leaving Utah for good. Well, thankfully, but unthankfully, a month later, I ended up getting my shoulder dislocated, torn labrum, and pulled my shoulder blade forward and tore the abbreviating muscles below it.
mm,
Ended up getting surgery for that. Kind of ended my hockey career to some extent. Couldn't take the physical contact to that shoulder anymore. And I knew it was kind of over from there. And I remember in the recovery of that in January, I told my mom, hey, like, this is it. I want to go train horses, and went down my whole horse training path and found myself in Texas. Well, my first year in Texas working for Jarvis, one of my buddies' dads had killed himself.
mm,
And that one hit hard as well because he was like the father figure that I was searching for sometime in my life. And he was the guy who would go ride motorcycles with me, would talk, would invite me out boating. And was just a fun, great guy. And that one was a shocker as well. I was like, you're just like Logan,
Mm-hmm.
why? What was the question to this? And it wasn't until this last week with
Mm-hmm.
number 8 that I realized, there's no why. There's no why. You have to keep it simple with everything.
Mm-hmm.
You can try your hardest to understand, to overcome, to conquer, to figure out why, to go back through. There's a million things you can do to try to understand why somebody would do it, but at the end of the day, keep it simple. It was their choice. You can love them, you can express them, you can hate them, you can repress the memories, you can move on, you can a little part of you dies each time. And no matter what you do, you'll never bring that part back to life.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, there is no question to ask. There is only, acceptance, grieving, being sad, and moving forward because it's what their choice was that day.
So it sounds like what you've done is you decided in this past week, which is very interesting that we're doing this today, that
Hmm.
to control what you can control and let go of what you can't. And
Exactly.
so with the 8 people that have passed on, while it sounds like for a long time you felt responsible or that you could have done something to keep them here, and the freedom that you've just received, the transformative freedom that maybe you got clarity on, is that no, you couldn't. That it wasn't your responsibility, and it's more or less, like I said, from near death to life, it's more important right now for you to live your life and to be an example of how you've gone through this various traumatic experiences to find on the other side of it life for you and the people that are in your life.
Exactly. Exactly. And I always preach to everybody. I always tell people express yourselves, be confident, be positive, be joyful, talk to people. Even if you're shy, I got a couple buddies who are very shy out in public. And the best thing that comes about from me going out with them is that I love to see when they start opening up to even just random strangers when
Mm-hmm.
they're willing to go be expressive. And that was some of the teachings that I preach about today come from some of my buddies that were just that kind of person. My best friend Logan was that person. He was very expressive, very formal, had fun, talked a lot. He talked
Mm-hmm.
smack when we would play hockey. Like he was just such an expressive person. And I always loved that about him. He was never shy. He was never
Mm-hmm.
scared for people to see him for who he was. And that was something that I struggled with. I had false confidence a lot throughout my life. And being
Mm-hmm.
with Logan brought me to realize how to be true about my confidence and not hide it and not be shy to show people who I am as a person. And
Uh,
you know, with Mitch, it was very unorthodox. It was, kind of doing the opposite of things, not going with the flow, but being relaxed while he did it. And those things are things that I preach about today. But at the end of the day, the simplest thing I can say is keep it simple.
mm-hmm. So what?
Control what you can control.
Yeah. So one of the things that I find to be very important in the aspect of life is it sounds like you solved a problem for yourself. So if someone's listening to this podcast and you're trying to assist them to solve the problem of mental health, what would you say to them? What would you suggest that they do that you figured out for yourself?
There's a couple paths you can take and I've taken several paths. I've had several instances where I thought this is the end. I've written out my notes. I made my video. I left my phone password on a sticky note, and
Mm,
I thought, this is it. And the one thing that I can attest that helped me out the most, and it was the hardest thing I could ever do, was admitting that I needed help. Was
mm,
giving a phone call to somebody saying, I am struggling. I don't know how to tell you what I'm feeling. I just need you to help me figure out why I'm feeling it. And
mm,
that was the biggest struggle. And I mean, I can attest to this, not to everybody, but I know what that feels like, the lost, the closed off, the silent, the ignored, the feeling like you're weak, feeling sympathetic for yourself, feeling pity for yourself, honestly. and feeling like you could have done something more, helped somebody better. I went through all those stages, and the one thing I knew that helped was telling somebody I need help.
Mm,
They may not have the answers for you. And I've met a lot of people that have helped me along the way that have never been through this, have never had to go bury their friend at such a young age. And they never will experience it a day in their life. They've never had a friend commit suicide. And they were always super supportive and super encouraging. And the one thing that I was never good at dealing with was people having sympathy for me.
mm,
I despised it. And I know a lot of people out there feel the same way. I
mhm,
despise when people have sympathy for me. And the biggest thing I learned was how to accept that people are okay to sympathize with other people, and have a little pity for yourself. Don't be so hard on yourself. Admit when you're wrong. Feel sad when you need to feel sad. You don't have to go
mhm,
cry in public. You don't have to sit and cry in front of somebody, but at least find a way to outlet it verbally. Say your piece, say your mind. You can't keep everything in, including internal thoughts. I
mhm,
had a great quote from a hockey coach of a long, long time ago. He told me, your mind is a garden. You can either plant weeds or you can either plant roses. You are the
mm,
tender to your garden and you choose what you leave in there. And that quote always stuck with me. I mean, and I broke it down analytically for myself because that's how I am as a person. And it was, sometimes weeds sprout.
mhm,
Sometimes you can plant a bed of roses, but a weed will sprout every now and then. But it's up to you as a human being and as an independent person. It's up to you to go pull that weed. It's up to
mhm,
you to tend to your garden. And whether that's you have to verbally express it, you write it down, paint it, burn it, whatever you have to do to get that weed out is something that not a lot of people commit to today. And in my world now, the cowboy world, it's bad. Like I love all my friends and I pray for them as much as I can, but I can tell when my guys have something to say, but they can't say it because they weren't raised to say it.
mhm.
A lot of men around the world struggle with that, with
Right,
expressing it because we were always told, be a man, be tough,
right.
don't
So,
cry, hide your tears.
yeah. So it's what I love what you're saying because what you talked about sympathy or compassion. I had a spiritual mentor. His name was Henry Conyers, and he used to talk about having the voice of hope. And in
Hmm.
that was that no matter what's going on, anytime you can hear that voice of hope, which is compassion, kindness, even in the most dire situations, is that it's either that voice of like, oh, the world's coming to an end, or the voice of like, the world's coming to an end, and let's eat pizza,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
this is the last time you're gonna be able to eat pizza, and it's that voice of hope, which is it sounds like somewhere along the line you started internalizing your own sense of hope, your own sense of instead of a voice of I don't deserve to be loved or I don't deserve to have people care for me. I'm going to be more accepting. I'm going to be open to allowing people to assist me.
right. And it's not like I came from an unsupportive family. I had a
Right,
very supportive mother, and you know my stepdad. He was
right,
an outstanding man, still to this
right.
day. Still
Yeah.
talks to me almost every day of the week, and
Mm-hmm.
weeks I tell him things, but a lot of the time it was just my own pride. It was guilt, it was shame, it was pity for myself that, don't say anything, hide it, blah blah blah. And it
Yeah.
took me a long, long time to figure out that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to tell it. A lot of the reason that I found out that it was okay to ask for help was because I felt the amount of closure I had for those
Mm-hmm.
days and those instances.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Andy. Andy, I've known Andy for that's how I met you.
Yep.
And what role he played in assisting you.
Oh gosh, many. I mean, he was the father I never had growing up. He was supportive. He was at every game he could be at. He took me everywhere with the basketball team. As you know, he coached for the Utah Utes.
Hmm.
You know, I traveled with him. He was supportive. He was kind, caring, compassionate. But he was also a man that wasn't afraid to cry, and he
Hmm.
showed me that when his father passed away.
Right.
And I think that's when it started to click with me that, I need to start making my way towards that path of expressing myself. And, he was also the man that would take me fishing. And while we were fishing, he was the guy that would not say much, very quiet, very at peace with what he's doing. And,
Hmm.
even when stuff would get chaotic, and this is a life lesson that I love to tell, even when it would get chaotic, I hook into a big one, you're snagged on something, you're hooked onto a good sized fish, and you're reeling in, and you're all excited, and your adrenaline's running, and yelling and yippee and yay. And he was always a guy who was smiling but calm in the
Hmm.
midst of everything going on around him. He was always very calm and collected. I think I've seen that man upset one or two times, and it was because of basketball.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
something that he was very passionate about.
Yeah. I can attest to Andy's love and passion for you. I remember going to some of those hockey games when I would come to Utah to visit.
Yep,
I know Coach K was also played an important role in your life, and that
yep,
what I loved about Utah when I went and I had players that were there was that there was a family. It was like
yes.
he he would make sure that everyone was taken care of. He would include everyone. So that was a really important phase. Let's talk about your Cowboy World. So when I saw you on this horse and everything, I started thinking about Yellowstone and the horse trainer that's a part of that show. I said, is Garrett doing that? What is he doing? So let's talk about that transformation from the hockey to being a horse trainer, and how is that assisting you with your mental health?
Yeah, so after hockey, obviously I moved around, started training horses, and now I train in an industry called the NRHA,
Mm-hmm.
which is reining horses. And I don't know, you watched Yellowstone all the way through?
Yes.
So there's a scene in there in particular that will help you kind of understand what I do, where Taylor Sheridan and Jimmy are driving down to Texas and they make a stop in a small town to do a horse show. And Jimmy is getting the tail ready. And Taylor Sheridan ends up riding in the arena, and he does the spins, the circles, and the stops.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I do. I kind of explain it like figure skating for horses. We're
Mm-hmm.
judged based on maneuvers. You get a half point scale from 0 to plus 1.5 to 0 to minus 1.5. And you're judged based on each maneuver, the turn, the spin, the stop, the rollbacks, the circles. And when I'm training in, and I also rope as well. As you saw, I
Mm-hmm.
was in Vegas recently for the World Series finale. I'm a healer. But anyways, what I've noticed is since moving down to Texas, I felt a sense of not necessarily just freedom, but it felt like I had this massive brick lifted off my chest. Like it's behind me. I've moved on. I've come to realize that, it's life and I got to keep moving forward. I found out the more I rode, the more alone time I spent on the back of a horse in the middle of nowhere, Texas, in an arena, surrounded by the birds, the bees, and the sun, is that I began reminiscing more. I began feeling a deeper connection in my life with something. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know at the first if it was the horses, if it was my passion for the job, which I have such an immense passion for what I do and I love it. But I come to find out I started asking more questions. I started asking myself personally more questions. What was I thinking in certain instances? Why did I feel that way? Why did I feel so guilty because I missed a phone call the same night? Why? What correlation did it have to him passing away? And I started having a bigger connection with the religious side of things. I'm not gonna get. I don't like talking about it as much because I feel like it's a political topic at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd rather people just be at peace with what they do.
Right.
But I began becoming more religious to some extent, not all the way every day, but I started having more talks with myself. And, I come from a family, my grandma was kind of gypsy, but also Catholic.
Hmm.
So signs were a big thing for me. And I started noticing more and more that red-tailed hawks would sit on the fence when I was feeling that way.
Mm.
And the thing with red-tailed hawks is they're a spiritual connector
Wow.
to those who have passed, your loved
Hmm.
ones. And I noticed that every time I felt a certain way, I would always see one. And I thought that was just coincidence at first. And now I kind of see it as like maybe it's somebody telling me that they love me.
Mm.
And so it really helped me. Horses really helped me move forward in life because horses are so simple minded that they don't complicate things. They take the easiest path.
Hmm.
They always eat, they sleep, and they poop. And that's their life. You know, that's all they think about. And there's nothing, and they're super intelligent. They are super
Right,
talented and intelligent with what they do, but they're so simple at the same time.
right.
And I always
Just
think to myself, why can't we be that way?
yeah. Well, I think we were designed to be that way. We've just complicated it. I mean,
Yeah,
I like what you said. You know, they eat, they sleep, they poop,
yeah, that's it.
and they breathe. You know, and that's it. You know, and at the end of the day, when it's all over, that's what we do. And somehow, I love that analogy, and I also love the symbology of the red-tailed hawk because I think we do get symbols, and I also love there's something called remember the love. And so when anytime that we can reconnect to something that we loved at any point in our life. So for me, for instance, I connect to my grandmother when I used to go down as a kid to Georgia and I'd be on her farm and we would walk the fields every morning and pluck watermelons and we would break open the watermelons and eat the heart out. And I can still taste it. The sweetest watermelon I ever had in my life. I never will be able to physically have that sweetness, but it's a memory that stays with me. And so anytime we can remember the love, and that gives us fuel, it gives us encouragement, it allows us to move forward even in difficult times. And I love what you said about symbols because I think symbology is an important piece and spirituality is important. And anytime you can combine those, no matter what your religious belief is,
Yep,
or you believe that whatever the belief is, as long as you can connect to something that empowers you to move forward, I think that's important.
exactly. Exactly. And I love that aspect of it. And, there's also another quote, and I hate that it was on Yellowstone, but I heard it when I was younger. So I'm not quoting Yellowstone. I heard this as a kid from my grandfather. My grandfather told me when I was younger that horses synchronize your heartbeat from up to 4 feet away. And
Wow.
if a fly can land on a horse's back, always remember they'll feel your emotions.
Mm.
And that is one of the biggest things I've learned on understanding my emotions and how to control them is if I start freaking out, the horse is going to freak out. If
Hmm.
the horse does something wrong and I'm in a bad mood, that horse is going to have an anxiety attack thinking that I'm about to whoop on it.
Mm.
And so that aspect of horse training taught me, no matter what's going on, and Jarvis taught me to this as well. He said, no matter what that horse is doing, be relaxed, be
Right.
calm, be
Right.
slow, and Jarvis was a very good mentor in that aspect and demonstrating it. I've seen
Hmm.
horses break in half with Jarvis on them, I've seen
Hmm.
them lose their mind, run off, do stupid things, and Jarvis never really ever got frustrated or angry or mad. He was always kept his mouth closed, he sat up straight, he was breathing calmly and was very thorough with his movements
Hmm.
and getting that horse to understand it's okay, but we need to focus.
That reminds me of another scene from Yellowstone when they're riding up and
The horsefly bit the
yeah,
back of the
yeah,
horse
yeah,
and she
and
freaked out and it
she
took
freaked
off.
out and took off, and she almost killed herself. So
Yep.
it's like anytime anytime we freak out and we just run off, that's not a really good thing. And I think we tend to freak out, and if we could just take a deep breath and relax, like you're saying, sometimes it allows us to see a different path. And
Exactly.
it sounds like that's what you've done. You found a different
Hmm.
path and you're forging a path. And I'm sure, you know, in your very young age, you're going to have different paths. And I just really am proud of where you've traveled, how you transverse and how you've dealt with a lot of these different losses in your life. And you're finding a path that gives you life. So going from near death to life is a transformative aspect of your life. So in closing, what would you say is your takeaway from where you've come from and where you are now?
I think my biggest takeaway, and I hate to quote the Bible on a podcast, but it would always be being patient,
Mm,
following the path when it shows, being patient about your next move and not hurrying to make any judgment.
mm,
I spent a lot of time being fast, quick with life, harsh with judgment, and very abrupt with reality. And it took me a long time for that wall to hit me right in the face and tell me, hey, you got to slow down. And so
wow.
my biggest takeaway from that is just always remember, no matter what's happening in life, take a step back, take a deep breath, and figure out what to do next.
That's great. Patience is it's very similar to me on the golf course these days. I'm just
Yep.
very patient. Yesterday I was playing and I started out. I missed an easy putt for par, and I was like noticing when I'm playing golf now. What am I noticing? So then I missed another easy putt for par, and I said, what am I noticing? Why am I missing those easy putts that I normally make? And I go, oh, I'm not breathing. So I get there and I stop. I'm like, and
Hmm.
what was critical about me noticing what I was doing was I had two putts that I made that I needed to make money. And I made those putts because I noticed what I wasn't doing and I changed it. So
Yep.
anytime that we can be patient and not get all freaked out, then we can discover what it is that will move us forward. This is a funny question for you because you're so young, but if you could tell your younger self something, what would you say to yourself?
Oh gosh. I'd probably tell him to relax. I'd probably tell him to go take a boxing class or two and relax. I think that would be the biggest thing I would tell myself. If I walked up to my 15, 14, 13-year-old self, I tell him, go punch a boxing bag for an hour
Mm-hmm.
and relax.
Great.
Don't be so eager.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I love that. I would tell my younger self the same thing around a lot of things. And so that's a great message. Is there anything that you want to say to the audience? Anything that you want to promote? This is the time. Do it.
Yeah. So what I would like to say is always be open to new possibilities in life. Don't confine yourself to the norm of your day in, day out life. Always be open-minded. No, don't be afraid to travel, to leave home, to experience new things, experience life itself, and keep it simple. Don't overrush. Don't rush into things you don't understand yet, and definitely don't ever take the free lunch. So one thing I tell everybody, don't ever take the free lunch. There's something always with it. And then obviously, I would definitely love to shout out Burns Hat Company for helping me out this year. And also my boss, who is an amazing guy, Jarvis Anderson Performance Horses. Anybody looking to find out more about my industry or questions, you guys can follow me on Instagram at Traveling Laz, all one word, LAZ. And feel free to shout out and tell me your story if you guys ever need somebody to talk to. I mean, I'm always on my phone for some reason. I don't know why, but I always am. So I will always open and respond to people.
That is absolutely true. I've reached out to I'm on LA time, Garrett's on Utah time, but anytime sometimes I've sent him a message at 2 in the morning and he answers. I was like, whoa, dude, what are you doing up? I want to say like, dude, what are you doing up? But yeah,
Yep.
I really thank you for being a part of it. And this is the first episode of many to come, Near Death to Life. And if you want to know more about my MRI experience, you can go to my YouTube channel, Jerome Green Coaching, and you can see my PSA. I talk about doing an MRI and making sure you're asking the right questions before you agree to take one. In my case, I was allergic to the dye. It's a dye called gadolinium,
Mhm.
and it almost killed me. And supposedly it's 1 in 50,000 people, but it's more than that. They just don't tell you that. And
Yeah,
I want to do a shout out to just everyone that's out there, and just live your life, enjoy your life, find people that can be a part of your life, and people that are draining you or not assisting you, wish them well and move on.
exactly.
Thanks, Garrett. Thanks for watching the podcast, taking the time out of your day to do that. Please drop your comments, what you liked or disliked, or if you have a different viewpoint. I really look forward to seeing those comments, and I will get back to you. And take time, if you can, to subscribe to my channel, Near Death to Life. Have a great day.